After almost 3 years in the creation process, my book, The Spirit of Work, Timeless Wisdom, Current Realities, is making its publishing debut end of April 2022. By interweaving science, business, and sacred texts from the world's great spiritual traditions, The Spirit of Work offers a high-level but approachable way to view and structure work from individual, community, and institutional perspectives. I will be adding some solo podcasts to the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast to give you a taste of what the book is like and to whet your appetite for more. When the April countdown to publication starts, there will be weekly live sessions, book readings, and prize draws you will definitely not want to miss. To get in on the VIP launch and get your advanced reader copy of Chapter 6, Why You Need Your Heart to Work, go to shiftworkplace.co/bookvip. That's shiftworkplace.co/bookvip. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm very excited to present to you Dele Ajele, who is in business consulting. He's also an executive director and franchise owner of Corporate Connections BNI Alberta South in Canada. He has a passion for helping entrepreneurs to create a strong foundation for sustainable business growth. But he wasn't always a business coach. Dele started out in engineering, completing a bachelor's and master's of engineering degree in Nigeria, and then proceeded to do a doctorate in mechanical engineering in Nova Scotia. He is a Commonwealth Scholar. Congratulations on that. And Dele's career as a professional engineer has spanned a couple of decades, a variety of industries, which has given him a well-rounded approach, which he uses now in his role as business coach and consultant. Dele's transition from engineering to business coaching has been driven by a strong desire to see business professionals achieve their dreams while enjoying a life that is rich with relationships and personal fulfillment. Dele is a public speaker and enjoys volunteering as a way of giving back to his community. He was a volunteer instructor with the Alberta Board Development Program, training not-for-profit boards on effective governance. And Dele and his wife Moji live in Calgary, Alberta, with their 4 amazing children and, so far, 1 grandchild. So welcome, Dele. I'm so happy to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you very much, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here.
So please tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do outside of the professional formal bio.
Okay. Well, I may repeat just a few of the pieces of the bio that you have read, but again, my name is Dele Ajele. I grew up in Nigeria, obtained a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering out there. And then in 1990, my family and I moved to Canada, for me to pursue a doctorate degree.
So you came to Canada as an international student then?
That is correct, under the Commonwealth Scholarship, yes. And I've worked as a professional engineer in the manufacturing sector for about 14 years, and then a consultant in the oil and gas in Calgary for about 3 years before transitioning to business consulting and coaching. As you outlined earlier on, my wife and I own BNI Alberta South as co-executive directors, as well as Corporate Connections. And these organizations, BNI, for example, networking and referral marketing organization that offers small business owners professional support and business generation, by referrals. And in Corporate Connections, very similar, but we provide an environment for business executives, larger business executives, to generate strategic business opportunities, engage in peer-to-peer learning, as well as just experience the extraordinary through a variety of outlets. Outside of business, my wife and I love to spend time with our children, and we love travel. Although in the last couple of years, as you all know, COVID has made that a little more of a challenge. But I love running. I am a marathon runner. I have run 7 marathons and a couple of half marathons, and I just enjoy doing that when the weather permits.
That's wonderful. I also like to run, but I stopped doing outdoor running after ratching my knee 4 times in a row.
Yeah, I know. It's touchy that way.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. Sounds like you have a really well-rounded experience and life. What made you decide to come to Canada? What was involved in that choice?
Yeah, so I was a teacher in the university after my master's degree. And generally, when you find yourself in that kind of in sphere, the next step is, PhD and become, I always thought that I'll be an academic because, again, I love that. However, in Nigeria, especially not just Nigeria, but developing countries, we know that academic programs are not as that well developed, especially, again, talking about at the graduate level. So at the time, had to look outside to pursue a doctorate degree in order to actually make academic a career. And, just a few countries generally that are of interest would be Canada, Australia, and the UK. And just from what I knew about Canada was my first choice. And so I applied, I got the scholarship, and the rest was history.
So what was that experience like to do your doctorate in a new country?
It was fascinating experience. Again, there were many things that were different. Obviously, climate was the biggest. And so moving from a very, very warm climate to a very cold region of the world, but because of the graduate program, I was fully engaged in it. So the impact of the weather was not as much on me as it was on my wife at the time, who, came along with me. But I found it quite challenging, quite engaging, and just a whole different world, getting into graduate studies in a different country. You have to adjust to a few things at the same time. So
yeah, there are significant cultural differences.
Absolutely.
And you may have also experienced other negative things like racism, poverty, depending on what it was like. So how do you feel that you overcame the challenges and progressed?
I think, background also makes a big difference in the way you face any one of us, the way we face challenges in life. I grew up in Nigeria where I will say to a large extent, racism was not an issue. And so I grew up to understand and appreciate myself as, a person with career, with vision, with dreams, and everything else that anybody else will have. So coming to a different country, I didn't see myself as typically as would be seen in this setting as a Black man. I just saw myself as a man. So whether people reacted to me as a stranger and a Black man, it didn't really faze me. Maybe I was just naive. Those things did not quite stick with me. There may have been, and I believe I remember one, incident. There may have been a few incidents of racism, towards me. But again, I didn't live day to day conscious of that. And so I would not categorize it as a bad experience or someone who experienced racism a lot. No, I'd say the experience overall was pleasant.
That's great. You found that you just came in with confidence to a situation. And if something came up as a challenge and you did notice a few things, you didn't take it in a way that you felt affected you. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. People have different kinds of experiences and they respond in different ways, but it's really interesting to hear what they all are.
That's true.
Did you have children already when you came to Canada?
Yeah, we came with one child and then 3 other children followed. So we have 4 adult children. One was born in Nigeria and then the other 3 were born here.
I see. The majority of your family was born in Canada then?
Yeah, that is correct.
Oh, that's great. So can you share a couple of incidents from your childhood that you believe made you into that person that you are today?
Very good question. It's really hard to pin who I am today to any few individual incidents in my childhood, certainly not to 1 or 2, but I will recall, that did impact me. I may not be able to assign value to them in terms of the degree of impact or, on who I am today. But one that came to mind was when I was a little boy in grade 6, one of my teachers just basically adopted me and just came to me and said, hey, I'd like you to be my boy, basically, live with me or, help me from time to time. Now, let me put that in context because for someone in Canada, that may not make sense. But for someone, growing up in where I did, being associated or connected with a teacher was a big privilege. You get to be excused from a lot of work that other manual labor that others will be involved in because you're considered as a helper to a teacher. And then it really elevates your status as a student because, for a teacher to pick you to be, his assistant, so to speak, it's really an honor. And so he did that. Up to today, I have no idea why he did. But that really boosted my confidence. And at the time, I was going through quite a bit of a challenge at home that amounted to, self-esteem issue, as well as just managing myself and my family. So this really came at a strategic time in my life, and it boosted my confidence and my ability to actually become someone that I can dream to be someone important in life. Not only that, it became a foundation for me to learn the importance of helping others, the importance of contributing to others, no matter how small, because you never know what role that contribution will play in their lives. And so today, I look out for people who are struggling. I look out for people who may just need a little bit of a helping hand and encouragement or something to support them and take them, to that next level. And that experience really helped me with that.
Do you think that teacher noticed somehow or sensed somehow that you were having a tough time at home and just wanted you to get that extra little boost?
Now that you say that, I think that is true, because the year before that, he was my teacher in grade 4. He was not my teacher in grade 5. But in grade 5, my performance had gone down a little bit. So I think maybe he noticed that and thought that, yeah, I think I could help you, because I know you're a very good student, but I saw that you struggled last year. So that must have been his reasoning.
When I was in grade 8, I had a similar experience. The teacher didn't ask me to live with her because that would have been considered really inappropriate here.
Right. Yes.
But I also was having difficulties at home, and my performance dropped significantly. And the teacher pulled me aside and said, I've really noticed that your marks have dropped, and I don't think that's you, so if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here for you. And I never took her up on it. But the fact that one adult noticed me, thought I had potential, and said, I'm here for you if you need me, it allowed me to pull myself up again. I think in the future, if I were to go back again, I probably would have gone and taken her up on that offer and said, listen, that's what's going on with me. I didn't at the time, but just that boost of confidence, saying someone noticed me, someone acknowledged that I'm dipping, they're seeing that I have potential, and they're also seeing that I'm struggling. I just felt so seen in that moment, Did you feel that way?
Maybe not in those words, but I felt like, wow, I think at the time, maybe 100 students in my class, but for him to notice and to invite me, for me, that was huge.
Yeah.
I said, wow, regardless of what he actually noticed or the reason, I felt like this was very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In a lot of African schools, I did some work in Sierra Leone, and African schools, it was probably still is common for a teacher to have 100 students in the class.
Right.
And there isn't a lot of chance to notice people when you have that many students. So you must have stood out. And I think you do, because look what you've done with your life.
well, thank you. We'll do the best we can, but thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else from when you were older that stands out?
I don't remember exactly when, but this was my father actually. I remember a time when he kind of addressed us, but I don't remember the circumstances, surrounding that. But it was just generally about, his principle around work. He basically said, look, work is a privilege. It's a God-given opportunity for us to contribute. Now, obviously, not in those words. Now, I'm kind of translating or interpreting what he said. And one statement that stood out to me was, don't ever equate work with suffering. Don't. If you're working, regardless of the work, regardless of the value of the work, don't imply that you're suffering, because it's a privilege to work. And that really, stayed with me up till now, that whatever I do, I want to do my very best at it, put all my effort to it and do it, because regardless of where it fits in life, in career, in society, work has an intrinsic value in itself.
It does.
And we must, that's how I take it. And that's, again, have I always done my best? Maybe not, but that's the principle that I want to live with in terms of work.
I'm in the process of publishing a book called The Spirit of Work, which is exactly about that.
Wow. That's awesome.
The intrinsic value of work and how it offers meaning, but then also how we can revitalize organizations and institutions by understanding what work really gives to humanity and taking away those things that remove meaning and purpose from work.
Right.
So anyway, that's a whole other story, but those are two really great incidents. Thank you so much for sharing them.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So from the groups that you were born into, because everybody's born into a whole bunch of groups, oftentimes we just become aware of what those groups were as we get older. But from the groups you were born into, what would you say has influenced your sense of culture and self as a leader?
Well, in general, the family and the ethnic culture to which I was born, we regarded and still do regard the community very highly. So it's generally accepted or believed that your behavior impacts not only you, but your entire family, and sometimes your whole community. So we are thought to be considerate of others in our decisions and in our actions. That is the culture that has stayed with me, that in making decisions, that always thinking of others. Or in fact, recently somebody asked me, one question that somebody asked me was, what's my motto in life? And a part of it that I shared with this individual was that, always leave things better for those who are coming behind, regardless of what it is. It's space, just do your best to leave things better so that the person coming behind gets there and say, wow, thank God for the person who was here, something like that. And so that's one in my culture that has really impacted me. The other, later in my early 20s, I became a Christian. So the Christian culture that I accepted in those years also became very impactful for me, because I became, as a practicing Christian, which I think that was my first year in the university that I, got into that. The teachings of Jesus on love and kindness and generosity and other community building attributes have deeply impacted me. And I just feel that my life will not really be the same, if not, apart from that. So I just feel that in any way that I can impact somebody else with kindness and generosity, that I am the better for it. And that's, again, some of the principles that I have garnered from my culture.
And I wish everybody had those, because think what a wonderful world we would live in. But I just wanted to ask you with regard to your point about Christianity, didn't you grow up in a Christian culture? Isn't Nigeria typically Christian already?
That's it. That's a great question. Actually, if you see Nigeria as a country, it is almost half and half Muslim and Christians. So in the northern part, majority will be Muslims. In the southern part, majority will be Christians. With that said, yes, I grew up in a Christian culture, but handed down this, Christianity is just religion, right? Just something you go to church and all of that. But as I grew up in my youth, as again to university, I got to make a conscious decision to be a practicing Christian. And that's the difference. And that required more personal commitment to actually live out, those the teachings and the practices. So
yeah, it's that intentionality and making a decision to commit to a belief system. And usually there's a faith experience involved when people talk about it, where they had some insight or some deepening. So it often can be very pivotal for how people approach their lives. Would you say that's true of you?
That's very, very true. Yes, I remember, I don't remember the exact date, but I remember the occasion where, yes, there was that faith experience, personally for me. And that definitely changed. I don't want to say the trajectory of my life, because probably the same career and all that, but it definitely changed my view of life, the people I interact with, and philosophy. Yes, I definitely became a changed person as a result of that faith experience. Yeah.
In a way, that's kind of like my next question, because really, I wanted to know what groups you chose to belong to. So you grew into the group, but you chose to belong to that group consciously when you talked about your faith experience as a young adult. But what other groups have affected the way you are? Like, I would imagine engineering and the whole engineering culture, mechanical engineering, or perhaps manufacturing engineering, would be one example, but there could be others too. Sometimes people have hobbies or interests or an approach that they do that they chose, maybe a language or could also be that you chose to belong to Canada, right? So is there some group belonging that you chose later on in life that you feel has affected your sense of culture and leadership?
Yes. As you've kind of highlighted, lots of groups. There's a one, conscious decision of becoming Christian and went through different stages and phases of leadership and, practice and interaction and activities that impacted who I am today and the way I lead. And I would just allude to that a little more before I add other areas. And that is one of the areas of impact in terms of leadership for me. It really influenced the type. I am sure that, as you know, there are types of leadership and leadership models out there. For me, it really helps me to stress or strengthen the collaborative leadership model a lot more, getting consensus of stakeholders in a group or an organization and making sure that, serving those people. And also talking about serving, the servant leadership style, that when you are in a position, you do not see yourself or should not see yourself as someone who is being served in that position. Rather, be someone who is serving those who have the privilege to have in the organization, especially if you're leading a business where you're not seeing people who are working for you as working for you, but you see them as people you're there to serve. So that whole concept is something that is very important to me. And also caring and taking care of the weakest in a group. Not that everything is focused towards the weakest, but you want to make sure you do not leave those, behind or abandon them. Other things, groups and places have, been privileged to be part of. As you mentioned, my career as an engineer, we're taught and trained to be very thorough in the things we do and to, be focused. And that also has played into my personality or kind of helped me or trained me to be that way. But, being focused and being thorough in whatever I do. And that's why I cannot do a lot of things at the same time, or I'm not a good multitasking. And I put that in quote, and being very versatile on social media where there's so much coming at us and you're responding, almost every minute to those things. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but I just have learned not to be that way, because when I sit down at my desk during working hour, I want to focus and I have a problem at hand. I want to focus at that. And sometimes just 2 hours, 3 hours, be focused and do whatever you do thoroughly. That again, as the way I see things.
Mm-hmm. All of the studies that have been done on effective productivity have to do with being focused and using slow thinking, because a lot of processes are slow thinking process. If you're jumping from one social media platform to the other and clicking and liking and adding a comment, that's a fast process.
Yes.
When you're solving an engineering problem, it's a slow process. And you have to consider all the aspects and make sure you didn't miss anything, and that you've got a plan B if there's something that may not work, and all of that stuff. So there are two different types of thinking, and knowing what type of thinking works best for you and how you should focus your attention is really, I think, good self-awareness. And what you mentioned before about making sure that the vulnerable are taken care of is, the rising tide lifts all boats. And what we've really noticed with COVID is that the neglect of the elderly and children has resulted in all the boats dipping pretty low. And neglecting sectors in the economy, for example, meat processors or other sectors in the economy where people are more vulnerable and are often worked too hard, has resulted in effects for the whole society. And we can't ignore our interconnectedness anymore.
That's right.
And we can ignore it at our own peril because it's right in front of our face right now. It's not something we can put aside. And so I just think that the way you expressed it, being a servant leader, not looking for perks or privileges, but rather being there to collaborate and to be of service to others, is how we lift all boats, right?
Yes, that's true.
I was just extrapolating on how I see you're doing. So if you think it's not correct, then please correct me on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, so far, so good.
So how would you say your temperament and personality affect the way you see the world? So temperament, and maybe being thorough could be part of your temperament, right? So temperament is what you're born with, and you just pretty much keep that up. And then personality is you add on to what you're born with, but you might add on to things that you're not born with. Like, for example, I am the least patient person on the planet. I was not born with patience, but I have learned to be patient. And oftentimes people say, you're so patient. I go, no, that can't possibly be me. So how does that apply to you?
Yeah, I think my temperament / personality is more of a nurturing, caring, collaborative, and inclusive type. I believe every individual can be valuable if given an opportunity to contribute in their own way. And so when I view the world through this lens, sometimes I'm shocked by how curt, rash, and dismissive some leaders can be of others, whether in politics, business, or other areas of life. I believe there's hardly any goal in life that's worth pursuing if it means trampling over and walking over people to achieve it in any arena. We need to learn to see something good in everyone, especially our opponents, no matter what's at stake. There's no individuals that's 100% evil, nor is there one that's 100% good. Therefore, we can learn from most people in most circumstances. And so I generally want to give people a chance, maybe a second chance, and so forth. And I would consider myself a good listener, depending on the circumstance. Sometimes I may not be, but I would generally consider myself a good listener and really want to see people be at their best. If there's anything, in fact, another question that was asked of me recently is just that whole motto. And I was thinking, I want to be a catalyst for individuals discovering the best about themselves.
So you were already born with a caring and considerate nature, which would have been your temperament then, but you just built on it and made it a super strong component of who you are. Would you say that's true?
I would say that's true. And there are aspects that maybe I wasn't born with, or maybe it's not as dominant, that also, like you said earlier on, I have learned to learn, to develop over the years. And that would be maybe more of the outgoing side of me, where I can see a stranger, I can talk to them, I can, make them feel comfortable. That's an aspect that I've had to learn. And sometimes it may even start to look natural, feel natural, but I know for sure there was a time I had to consciously learn to do that.
Good example. Yeah. So can you recall a time when you became aware that your cultural understandings were specific to your own cultural experience and not just the norm for everybody else?
Okay. Perhaps the most outstanding, or the one that stands out more, was when we moved from Nigeria to Canada. Obviously, huge cultural traverse, we made at the time. It didn't take long before I realized that, some of the practices that I attached to respect for elders in my culture were quite specific to that culture. They're not practiced everywhere. For example, just acknowledging and greeting an older person the first time you see them, either in the morning, and doing so in a certain posture and very deliberately. That, for me and my culture, the culture I grew up in, was huge. Somebody older than you meet them first time in the morning, look them in the face and maybe bow down and actually say good morning. But coming to Canada and find out this is not exactly the same. And so you may take it as rude initially, but with time understand that no, it's not rude. It's just a different culture. And that which I learned in my culture was pretty much specific, to that culture. Also, automatically assuming that an older person needs your help to carry something or to do some physical activity. That's also something that's very common where I grew up. You see an older person, not necessarily old person, but older, coming up and carrying something or doing something. You want to jump in and help them, or jump in and take that from them. Whereas here in Canada, people enjoy doing things for themselves, and it's part of keeping fit, keeping healthy. And so sometimes people can see it as an insult if you try to grab something from them just because they're older than you. So again, I found that out as I started to learn more about my new culture. So it's just a couple of examples.
You are the third Nigerian that I've spoken to who said that was the specific thing that they found most shocking when they came to Canada or the US was just the difference in the way elders were treated, anybody who's older than you. But each person, of course, had their own story. But it's interesting that that is something that particularly struck all three Nigerians that I spoke with. Like I said earlier, I did a bunch of work with people in Sierra Leone, and I had an experience with a Sierra Leonean family that I knew quite well, where the mother and I were talking about a project that we were working on together in the living room of the home. And the teenage daughter came in and said hello and asked her mother a question. And her mother jumped up and slapped her daughter in the face and said, "How dare you disrespect our guest and your elder?" And I was completely shocked. I said, "What did she do wrong? And how did I contribute to it so she doesn't get slapped in the face again?" The girl also didn't know what had happened. She came to Canada when she was 2. And so her cultural norms were a lot more Canadian than Sierra Leone.
That's right. Yes.
And so after asking a few questions from the mother, and the mother said, "Well, first off, she's standing above us over top of our heads and speaking down to us. And secondly, she didn't greet you first and then greet me. And thirdly, she didn't ask if she could speak." And I went, "Oh, okay. And I didn't like any of it. Neither did the daughter. And the mother was very upset with her daughter, and the daughter didn't understand why. But you could really see the wheels turning in everybody's minds going, "Oh, okay. All right. I think I know how to avoid this situation in the future." And it was really significant for me because I didn't realize that there were things like standing higher than another person that would be considered really offensive.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, that's typical. I mean, maybe not the same consequence, but the perspective is so true.
Yeah. We have a lot to learn from each other, don't we?
Absolutely.
So we're reaching the end of the interview. And I wanted to ask you, when people enter into a business contract with you or they work with you in one of your consulting franchises that you own, what brings out the best in you? How should people work with you to bring out the best in Dele Ajele?
Wow. Great question. That is, I love it when people have clear vision. I mean, it may not be, that clear before, but, maybe through our working together, they somehow guided, they're able to identify what they really want in life and being prepared to, step by step, realistically do what it takes to pursue that and to achieve that. But while doing it with great respect for other people, not doing it at the expense of their relationship, but doing it in such a way that it respects those around them, their relationship, and pursuing that relentlessly. That for me, it really brings the best in terms of just the desire and the motivation to support them and to see them achieve whatever that vision, that dream may be. One of the things that gives me a lot of satisfaction in the clients that I work with is being able to bring an individual from this place of confusion, not really knowing the next step to take and get to the next level, but getting through that whole, cloud and getting them to a point where they light up and just feel, wow, I see the path now. I see exactly what's next, and helping them to achieve that next level. I love the kind of expression of radiance and joy that comes from such an individual at such times, and that just fills my cup.
So for them to be visionary, but responsive at the same time, not aggressive, and then coachable, really.
Coachable, yes, definitely, yeah.
This has been really a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience?
I will say, especially those who are in leadership roles, it's really important for us to be people focused. And I know that it may sound like cliche, but to think of the legacy we leave, to think of the impact we make on, the lives of people around us, and, to leave people feeling better about themselves than when you met them. That may mean you trying to find out that treasure in them, regardless of who they are and how they come across. Find that treasure in them and bring it to their awareness. Let them leave feeling better. And when you deal with people, listen carefully to the need or the problem before trying or attempting to solve it. Ask questions and genuinely care about the answer. that they provide.
That's beautiful advice. Thank you so much. I really appreciated your insights and your beautiful, all-embracing vision and practice in the way that you work. It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. It has been a pleasure, and look forward to more conversations.
Dele Ajele is co-executive director and franchise owner of Corporate Connections at Alberta South and BNI Alberta South, Canada, also known as Business Network International. An engineer by profession, Dele is also a business coach and consultant with a passion for helping entrepreneurs create a strong foundation for sustainable business growth. Together with his wife, Moji, they had one of the most successful BNI chapters in Canada and are both sought-after speakers and presenters, passionate in their dedication to the success of entrepreneurs and small business development. I very much enjoyed my interview with Dele, and am honored that he took the time from his busy schedule to grace our podcast with his wisdom. Do share the podcast with anyone you think would enjoy it and benefit from listening. Thank you so much for listening, and may culture and leadership connections continue to guide and inspire your day. This podcast would not be possible without the expertise of our Culture and Leadership Connections production team. A big thank you and shout out to Mike Kurlander for audio production and editing, to Malvika Kathpal for the show notes, Bernadette Guadiz for online web and social media management and promotions, Celine Bayogo for design, and Kirsten Hoyer for website and branding. Thank you so much.